Hello again, everybody. I'm going to tell you the story today of an amazing queen who has been through an incredible amount. So, as many of you who watch the channel regularly will know, I have a Lasius Flavus queen. She was caught in the summer of 2020, July 2020. And I started her as just a single queen. I didn't even realise at the time I caught her that she was a Flavus queen, and it was only after I had her in the test tube I kept looking at her and thinking she doesn't look right to be Niger. She's got this yellow, and sure enough, she had yellow workers, so I knew that she was a Flavus queen. I have a particular affinity with this queen because rather than me finding her, she found me. She was actually crawling up the bedroom wall with her wings already detached. So she came into my house, into the bedroom, and that's one of the reasons that I did catch her. She featured in one of the very, very early videos on this channel when my sound quality was non-existent and I hadn't learnt video editing. And has featured all through this channel, although I haven't spoken about her that much. In 2021, I made a mistake with her. I was trying to put food into a small test tube colony, and something fell over on my desk and hit the test tube, and it didn't break it, but it caused them all to run around in panic, and a load of them ran out of the test tube, and I had them over the desk, and I was too inexperienced at the time, and I didn't really know what to do. And I ended up just getting these workers that were running around all over the place and putting them into an outworld. And then I had the problem of how was I going to get them back into the tube, and I connected the tube up to the outworld, but they didn't seem to find the hole, and they didn't find the tube. And again, inexperience, I worried too much. They didn't instantly find the tube, so I thought, you know what, I wanted to move them into a nest anyway. There was a nest connected to the outworld, and I thought, let's just dump the rest of the tube, including the queen and the brood, into the outworld near the hole, and hopefully they'll go into the nest. They did do that eventually, but it caused them to suffer afterwards. I started losing workers. Workers would just die afterwards. They didn't die at the time on the day, but after their numbers started dropping, brood started disappearing. And I made a video a while back about how you have to treat new colonies with care and not, just because you've got workers, you can't start to treat them aggressively and dump them and everything. And one of the reasons I made that video was the experiences I'd gone through with this Flavus queen and how she dropped down to 5 workers before she started bouncing back. And then she bounced back, and by 2022 she was back to about 70 to 80 workers, going very well, and I was really pleased with her development until we had some hot weather. And again, I made a mistake, and what I did was I put water into her nest, and I put a little bit extra because the weather was hot. But what I hadn't realised was that the sponge had completely died of old age. It had just flattened into a very flat, lifeless lump of sogginess. It wasn't a sponge anymore. And what that meant was that the chamber that the sponge used to sit in filled up with water, and it didn't absorb into the sponge, and then it leaked through the cracks in the layered acrylic nest and flooded the nest. I made a video about this. All of the workers appeared dead. They were underwater, but I took the whole nest apart, put them into the outworld, and over time, workers, I'm going to say, came back to life, but it just means they weren't actually dead in the first place. They were just like in a suspended animation because they were underwater. And I'd heard that ants can do this. I know that ants could go underwater and then reinvigorate. And yes, the workers all returned to action and relocated the brood into a new nest. But again, things weren't right. Workers started dying over the following months, over the following weeks. brood started disappearing. I don't know whether they were eating it or whether it was dying or what was happening to it, but the brood started going. And the workers that were alive started acting very strangely. They stopped functioning as members of the colony. They were just sitting around in different places. They weren't supporting the queen. They weren't feeding the brood. They seemed to lose their programming. And the numbers dropped and dropped and dropped. When I put her into hibernation, which was at the start of November, she was down to, I think it was 3 workers, and those 3 workers died very shortly after going into hibernation. And by mid-November, she was down to just a queen all on her own. And I wasn't very hopeful, but I thought, you know what, let's just keep going and see what happens. So she went through hibernation as just a single queen. And in the spring, I have fed her occasionally. I don't feed her every week. I maybe feed her once a month. I give her little bits of sugar. And I have even given her the most tiny of tiny insects, little tiny little things that you see on a window. When you look at a window with the sky behind it, you can see these tiny little insects sometimes running up the window, and you can just squash one on your fingertip. It's so small I have to use a cocktail stick point to get it off my fingertip and roll it off into the tube. But I did that to give her just tiny little bits of protein. And sure enough, she laid eggs. Eggs developed into larvae. I crossed my fingers, held my breath. Her brood wasn't progressing as normal. The numbers were constantly decreasing as time was going on, but she did eventually manage to get 1 pupa. And here at the end of this is the final end to this story, is guess what? My Lasius Flavus queen has once again got a worker. She is not alone. She has been alone since, like I said, mid-November, and 3 days ago she got her first worker. It's taken me 3 days to make the video, but there's 2 of them now, and I'm hopeful now that with a worker that will do work and support her, that she will go on and get more workers, and this will be the start of her recovery once again. And if there is a lesson to this story, which I have learnt, which again, I made a video regarding my 2 Queen Flavus colony and how I left them to move from their dry test tube to their new test tube on their own. I did no forcing at all, and it took them 75 days to move across. I made a video on this, but the reason I have done this is I have learnt with Flavus, they are so vulnerable, they are so sensitive. Do not force them to move when they are a small colony. You can only let them do it themselves. Even if it looks like your forced move has gone okay, everybody, all the workers are alive and it looks fine, in my experience, in the following months and weeks, things start to go wrong and workers start to die and brood starts to die and the colony goes downhill. But yes, she's back, she's got a worker, and I'm really, really happy. Thank you very much, everybody. Until next time, goodbye.